Speaker who's going to talk about how energy, the policies of Agenda 21 are affecting your pocketbook and will continue to affect your pocketbook. Laura Rambeau Lee is a conservative activist in the Tampa Bay area. She's become quite a prolific writer. Her articles, mostly on Agenda 21, appear on biggovernment.com, Freedom 21, Smart Girl Politics, and many other websites. So I'd like to introduce Laura Rambeau Lee.
I just want to start by saying that I'm sure most of you are aware. Whoa! Mike, sorry. Okay. You might be aware, but you need to understand that this is not an Obama issue. This has been going on for a long, long time, starting particularly with George H.W. Bush, and they just keep changing the players to keep us off a little bit. But so I've been able to connect the dots a little bit, and I wanted to explain to you how the energy policy, in conjunction with the Agenda 21, will affect us locally and how it is being played out nationally and also on a global scheme. So, the video? Yep. Okay. You gonna do it? Yep. Okay. So first I want to explain that I became unemployed a couple years ago, and I have a lot of time, so I've been paying attention to what's going on, and I don't just watch Fox, although you can get quite involved in it, but you need to open your mind and look at the other media. And I particularly enjoy comedy, so I watch The Daily Show. And Jon Stewart has quite a few interesting federal people in the administration that come on and speak to him. And if you pay attention to what they're saying, they tell you what's going on. And this first clip that we're going to play was Lisa P. Jackson, who is the EPA administrator. And she had a quite candid conversation with Jon Stewart, which I wish she would have continued on. But go ahead and go up to 5 minutes, 30 seconds. Because it was like about a 10-minute interview, but going into 5 minutes, 30 seconds was where I was like, what? Okay, so when I saw that, a couple things struck me. The first one was they're waiting to get a market price on carbon. The second is so we can meet our commitments to this country and the world. And I was thinking, what are our commitments to the world exactly? And I had heard about cap and trade, but wasn't up to speed on it really. It was just being discussed. And as I looked into it, it took me all over the place. And to Agenda 21 eventually. So So first, we'll go into cap and trade, and you may know what cap and trade is, but a brief explanation is that it's emissions trading, which once they have the carbon pricing, the market value set, a central authority, which is the banks, set a limit or a cap on the amount of carbon dioxide emissions that a plant or power company can emit. And what they have to do is they have to buy carbon permits or carbon credits from this banking organization. And if they actually have to buy beginning with like zero amount of carbon, and if they exceed that, then they will have to purchase more. And they would have to purchase it from people who either under emit and have the credits to give. And all of that is done through a brokerage house when that's the trade. So a couple years ago, there were a few bills floating around, the cap and trade bills, and one was put forth in the House and one was put forth in the Senate, and they both died on the vine, thank goodness. They weren't passed. I think we were running into the 2010 elections then, and it wasn't voting well, so they decided just to let them go. But John Kerry, who was the Senate S-1733, basically said, all right, you guys, if you're not passing it, we're going to go through and regulate. If you won't legislate, we will regulate, and you're going to be out in the cold. So in the runaround, the EPA issued a finding that carbon dioxide posed a threat to human health and welfare. And then in 2010, they issued a final rule for regulating major emitters of greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act goes back to 1970 under Nixon, but they're tying it in and starting to regulate emitters. The law or the regulation was supposed to begin July 2011, but they haven't, it's been pushed back. There's been a lot of uproar, and I'm sure you've probably heard about the coal companies saying that they're going to shut down because they cannot meet these emissions and the cost that would be involved in retrofitting their plants. It's just not worth it to them. So as they get everybody to buy into the carbon market, what they intend to do is make them commit to reducing their emissions. So as they meet, if they chance to meet a certain emission, they will start cranking it down and making it more and more stringent, therefore making them have to buy more carbon credits.
And make more people rich.
So how is this affecting us locally? This is quite interesting. I saw a thing on the TECO website, and I think out here in Lakeland, you're at Tampa Electric Company too, is that correct? Okay, so in 1999, on their website, they said they became the first utility in the nation to develop a plan with the EPA to address its coal-fired utility initiative. And in 2004, they joined the Chicago Climate Exchange because, of course, they have to start purchasing carbon credits. The Chicago Climate Exchange has since gone under, but it's the Intercontinental Exchange is now what it is. In 2010, it went out of business. So when you Google TECO and EPA, you find that there was a major lawsuit in 1999 from the Environmental Protection Agency against Tampa Electric Company and 7 other utilities across the country. And TECO was the very first one to settle on this. And this is the statement from Carol Browner, who was the EPA administrator at the time under President Clinton. And you kind of read it for yourself, but the big points are the TECO settlement is a benchmark in the Clinton-Gore administration's efforts to provide Floridians the greatest possible protection of the public health and their environment. Today's settlement means the action to reduce air pollution will begin at TECO's 2 largest facilities in 2001, and the company must continue steady reductions on a fixed schedule through 2010. Today's settlement means that TECO will have to meet tough, truly protective emission standards. And at the very end, we are pleased that the company has signed this settlement, and we hope that other utilities follow their example and bring significantly improved air quality to many other areas across America. So it seemed kind of coincidental to me that in 1999 they joined in an agreement with the EPA and then this lawsuit. So I have an acquaintance who builds power plants in the Tampa area, and I asked him if there was a coincidence here or is there a particular link, and he basically said, do you mean that they put a gun to their head? And I'm like, yeah, and he said, absolutely. So this is government thuggery as far as I'm concerned. It could be considered extortion. So now as I'm getting mail different times from Tampa Electric Company, they've gotten all kind of programs that they want you to saddle up for and be a conscientiously environmental citizen. And you can participate in the Renewable Energy Block Purchase Program. And strangely, a block of energy is about $5 a month, conveniently added to your electric bill. And the energy program, I break it down here showing that, if it's $5 a month, $60 a year, they're telling us that we can offset the same amount of carbon dioxide as not driving a car for 3 months. And, and 3 blocks offset the same amount of carbon dioxide as planting 1.5 acres of trees, so that's $180 a year. And 4 blocks offset the same amount of carbon dioxide as removing an average passenger car from the road for 1 year. But it's not. It's and the other thing they're trying to do is get us to participate in a free energy audit in which you'll get some free light bulbs too. Those new curly Q ones are really cool. And have a smart thermostat installed in your home. And smart thermostats are thermostats that can be adjusted remotely by the utility or the consumer to save energy during peak times, and it allows you to monitor your energy usage so that you can change when you use your certain amounts of energy based on timing. When they structure a cost line on it. So at peak times it's going to be more expensive. At lower times it'll be cheaper to use. So there are already several million load control switches installed in the U.S. by utilities over the past 25 years. So as I said, this has been going on quite a while. And I'm not sure if you've heard about the smart grid, but the smart grid is the plan that they wish to implement that will create sort of like an internet for energy, is how they're calling it. It's a nervous system where every house will be tied in to the grid through the smart thermostats. Okay, so, and it'll provide the ability to monitor and control energy consumption comprehensively in real time.
That's a smart meter.
No, that's the grid. Well,
Smart meters will come in.
but the grid will end up being able to monitor everything, because what they want to do is reduce our energy usage, like you saw in other things. They want us to reduce 70% of our energy. And if we don't do it voluntarily, they will have the capability of shutting it off at times. So there's some key words that you see in different writings, and the one is demand response, and basically they're encouraging behavioral signals or behavioral changes, basically thinking that if you use too much electricity and your bill goes up, you'll use less and your bill will go down. So that's a price signal as an incentive to reduce your use of electricity at this point. So the demand response is what they're challenging, and they want to get us to behaviorally modify our use of energy. And with the smart meters and the smart grids, that will enable demand response on the consumer's part or the electric company's part, so that they can provide the infrastructure that will support the implementation of responsible climate change policy. So they're going to read this. So as I'm reading this, I have quite an inquisitive mind. And as I'm getting mail from TECO saying, oh, we'll show you how to use less electricity, you can save on your electric bill. And I'm thinking, why would a utility company want me to use less electricity?
Yeah.
Because wouldn't that mean that they wouldn't make as much money?
Will they raise their rate?
What is their incentive? I'm unemployed and I have time. So, so I discovered a little trick here. Electric revenue decoupling, and what that does is it allows the electric company to separate the cost, their cost to provide energy to the consumer, from their profit side of the equation, because we still want to keep the investors happy with their investments in the electric companies. So decoupling, under decoupling, the company would generate profits at the consumer's expense. And California, of course, is the landmark of all this kind of stuff that's going on. And in 1983, they started this electric revenue decoupling. And traditionally, electricity utilities make more money when they sell more electricity. Decoupling, on the other hand, rewards utilities for selling less electricity. So they're incentivizing them to make you use less electricity. And I found this quote from Robert Michaels, who is the Institute for Energy Research, and this was in the stimulus bill. One of the other things that I guess I didn't read. And he said one of the stimulus bill's most alarming provisions is little known and difficult to understand: electricity revenue decoupling. Decoupling, another in a long line of anti-consumer energy policies, will force utility companies to raise electricity rates in an attempt to governmentally mandate consumer conservation. So now how does this tie into Agenda 21? I just have a lot of time.
Lucky for them.
And connecting the dots. So the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Kyoto Protocol, the original convention got people to commit but not necessarily mandate a commitment to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. The protocol commits them to do so, and we, America, did not sign the Kyoto Treaty, although 37 countries did. They're industrialized or prosperous countries. And so this whole carbon trading scheme, okay, under the treaties, countries must meet their targets primarily through national measures. So what the UN did through the Kyoto Protocol is allow 3 different market-based mechanisms by which the countries that had committed to greenhouse gas emission reductions could work off their debt. The first one, emissions trading, is the cap and trade. The second, clean development mechanism, okay, allows a developed country with an emissions reduction commitment to help assist in projects in developing countries. And they can earn a certain amount of carbon credits that'll go towards their commitment. And they get it's a certified emission reduction credit. It stimulates sustainable development and emissions reductions while giving industrialized countries some flexibility in how they meet their reduction or limitation targets. They're thinking about everything. And then the other way is joint implementation, which really allows 2 developed countries to work with one another to transfer carbon credits so that they can meet their emissions reductions. Makes you wonder, like when we're giving money to Brazil to drill, if we're working this off, or if we're nation building, if we're working this off.
None of the countries in the Pacific Rim where all the industry went to have either signed on to any of this stuff.
That's correct. Okay, so although the United States never signed the treaty in 2009 at the climate conference in Copenhagen, where they were frozen, Hillary Clinton pledged that developed countries would mobilize $100 billion a year by 2020 to go towards the carbon. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
So this is purely a wealth redistribution scheme. And I have a little breakdown here of how much it really costs for different types of energy. And this is done by the federal government's Energy Information Administration. And as you see, conventional coal power is $78.10 for megawatt hour, and it's in 2016 based on 2008 dollars. Onshore wind power is almost double. Offshore wind power, thermal solar power, and photovoltaic power is $396. It's like 5 times what coal power is. So when you heard the president, when he was candidate, say that energy costs will necessarily skyrocket, this is what he had in mind. And just a couple brief things that I've been following with the wind turbines. The European community has basically embraced this already, and this is part of why they're having so much trouble. In 2009, they had an excess amount of deaths due to freezing. 40,000 people died in England and Wales and Scotland. And now they're doing allowances so people can afford to pay their bills, because they weren't putting their heat on because they couldn't afford it anymore. In Scotland, in this last year, I followed it, in the winter, the wind turbines got so cold that they were seizing up, so they had to bring generators out to heat them up to keep them from freezing up. So it costs more to heat them up. It costs more in energy to heat them up than they actually produced. But then in the spring, everything was going fine, and they were just spinning and spinning, and they were producing so much electricity, they were being paid to shut them down. Because there's a problem with storage. You know, there's no energy is an on-demand kind of thing. It can't really be stored. It would be outrageous, the battery capacity. So, and then also we've had several environmentalists in this country pushing for the wind turbines. In the areas that have got it now, there's several states that are screaming about it, because in Maine, for one, the noise is unbelievable apparently. If they're within a mile of it, the noise is just, so they're making them shut them down at night so they can sleep. And also, something I didn't realize before was that at a certain time of the day when the sun is like setting and you've got the turbine there, these people are getting a strobe effect that is causing people to have seizures. I mean, can you imagine like this Like, with the, like, right to that. So, not to mention it's killing, they're killing birds like by the thousands too. And the environmentalists aren't yelling about that. Wind is not the way to go. So I'm just going to leave you with quotes from candidate Obama before he was elected, and he basically said that they needed to get the American people to say that this is really important and force their representatives to do the right thing. That requires mobilizing the citizenry, and his plan would put a cap and trade system in place that is more aggressive than anyone else out there. Every unit of carbon or greenhouse gases emitted will be charged to the polluter. And if someone wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they will be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted. He said all. It will also generate millions of dollars, the cap and trade, that we can invest in solar, wind, biodiesel, and other alternative energy approaches. And because I'm capping greenhouse gases, whatever the industry is, will have to retrofit their operations. That will cost money. They will pass that money on to the consumers. He was telling us exactly what this plan was. And it will send price signals to get people to change their behavior. Under my plan of a cap and trade system, electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket. This is what he was talking about. And it's tied locally, and our utilities have been coerced into complying. And we need to not allow smart meters into our homes because we need to foil this. And if they can't monitor what everybody's doing, I think that's a good fight, and we need to fight that good fight. By law, it's not mandatory. If they say they have to come in and do it, it's not. It's a voluntary thing so far on our part, so we don't have to cave to them coming out and doing it. And those light bulbs aren't really worth it, even if they're free. So,
Understand you have to opt out of it, or if you allow them to put it in there, you're giving your permission.
Yeah, but they don't always ask. Sometimes you just come home from work and it's there. So they don't ask.
Write a letter.
So I just wanted to say, I remember back in the 90s when Wall Street came out and Gordon Gekko said, greed is good. The new mantra seems to be green is good. So we need to be careful when we hear things that are green and sustainable, because we're not involved in that. Well, thank you very much. Like Rita said, I have been writing quite extensively on some different Agenda 21 issues. My blog site is rightreason.com. That's right-reason.com. So you can follow me. Thank you very much.